Y'all join palms and repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. Keeping the palms joined. You put the palms down. All right, good morning, everybody. Nice to see you all here. Thanks for showing up. So this morning had a 5-precept retreat with the college kids, and I said this when we did it last time, but I should do one for the non-college kids because I think it would be really cool for all of you. But we spent a couple hours walking through the precepts and kind of sharing their relationship to each one of them. And then at the end, as is common in Buddhist practice, which is this idea behind taking vows. And, you know, the word vows means different things to different people, but for the most part, we all have a relationship to the word vow, you know, to some extent in some way in our lives. And so in Buddhist practice, vows are important. You know, they're really for you and you only, even though obviously your vows and your actions, behaviors impact other people. But the vows really are for you. Nobody knows if you're abiding by them or not. But it's just a really beautiful point of practice. So, you know, traditionally in Buddhism, you take vows, and when you take these vows, they're vows for life. But since we are exploring the 5 precepts, and they're all of the average age of probably 19 years old, we take the vow for a week, which is really difficult. Even just to throw out there without getting into it right now, but even just everybody in this room, ask yourself, could you go an entire week and not lie? Most people are out already at just that, without even getting to the next 4. Right? So the first one is to refrain from lying. The second one is to refrain from harming. Often it gets translated as killing, but it's really to do no harm. So to refrain from harming, to refrain from stealing, taking what's not yours. It doesn't mean necessarily like, you know, walking into a bank and robbing the bank, although that would also be frowned upon. But, you know, to refrain from taking what's not yours, to refrain from any sort of sexual misconduct, and to refrain from any sort of intoxicants, drugs, alcohol, anything that alters your state of mind. So these are the very basic 5 precepts as taught by the Buddha. There are, depending upon the tradition and lineage, anywhere from 227 to 311 precepts that were taught by the Buddha. And these are the first 5. that very often when you take refuge and you go through kind of formal, ritual type stuff, you take those first 5 precepts. So just looking at them for what they are, and you can just kind of check in with yourself very quickly. How hard would that be to do for a week? And the cool thing about like precepts and taking vows and trying to do them is, like I said, nobody else is judging you for it. Nobody else even really knows, truly. It's more of just something for you to do, not to judge yourself, not to critique yourself, not to think that you're like a bad person or a bad Buddhist or, I failed Buddhist 101. But just to ask yourself, like, wow, how do these practices, how does lying and harming and stealing and intoxicants and sexual misconduct, how do these things alter my life? How do they play a part of my life? How do they impact, as I always say to them, how do they impact you in your life currently and those around you? So that's what these are really designed, I think, initially, for those, especially maybe you're newer to Buddhism, to kind of explore like how these play out in your life. Because what the Buddha taught very clearly is what we refer to as the 3 Dharma seals within Buddhist practice. And this is sila, samadhi, and prajna, morality, meditation, and wisdom. And very often we come into practice, as I think I just talked about this Tuesday night, even maybe last Saturday, but majority of people who come to this morning or anytime you go to a place like this, what's the main reason people go to stuff like this? For what?
Feel better.
That was all at the same time, so I didn't hear it.
Feel better.
Feel better? Peaceful. But to do what? It's kind of a bad way to question it. Huh? Meditate. Most people are coming here to meditate. Which I get it. It's introduction to meditation and Buddhism, so it would make sense that you would come here to meditate. But what the Buddha really wanted you to understand is that your moral, ethical behavior is way more important than your meditation practice. Because if you have a sense of morality and ethical conduct and behavior, and you make wise choices, then the stress and chaos and craziness in your life decreases. And if the stress and chaos and craziness in your life decreases, then there's less of a need and desire and a craving to escape to meditation. So many years ago, and I've told this so many times, I don't remember who said it, if it was one person or a lot of people, but I've stolen it just like everything else I've stolen from everybody else's Buddhist teachings, is an angry person who meditates is just an angry meditator. So remember that it's not just about meditation. It's about deeply looking at what are we sitting with. And that's a really important part of this practice, to not gloss over that morality stuff. And as I used to often joke at the old Buddha for You, we had a big sign that said free meditation, and we would pack that place twice a week. And often I would joke and say, if that sign said free morality, how many people would have shown up? So on that note, I'm glad you all showed up this morning for the free morality class. You're going to absolutely love it. It'll be phenomenal. So that's the hard part of Buddhist practice. Meditation's the easy part. Moral, ethical conduct and behavior is what's that expression where the rubber meets the road? That's it, right? Expression. Or did I make that up? Okay. All right. You never know. All right. So with that, we'll start with the meditation practice, because the morality stuff will be way too boring for everybody. So we'll go into meditation. To those who are joining online virtually, welcome. Good to see you all here. Feel free to say hello and introduce yourself, chime in. Meditation practice, for those who might be new or joining for the first time, a couple things to tell you before we begin. Nothing's going to happen to you. You're not going to float away. You're not going to have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice, meaning don't ask yourself, is this working or not working? Are you doing it right? Are you doing it wrong? We're just going to sit. We're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds inside, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos. This practice of meditation is learning to get quiet and still within all of the chaos. Posture, you just want to be comfortable. If you're on a cushion, often it helps slide into the front third, pushing the stomach forward, allows the back to straighten. Same thing if you're on a bench or chair, just trying to sit up straight, relaxing the shoulders, hands are on the knees or in the lap. If you need to move, simply move. Movement doesn't make you a bad meditator, it just means your leg hurts. I will guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. Most important, do not expect anything. We're just going to sit and breathe. And starting with the eyes closed, if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed, whatever's comfortable. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Knowing throughout the practice, you'll hear sounds. These are not distractions, not disruptions. Simply what's happening around us as we sit. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus, to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath. And as the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it, release that thought, return attention, focus to the breath. Breathing in, follow breath in. Breathing out, follow breath out. keeping the mind alert, aware of each sound. Each thought, each physical sensation, yet concerned with nothing but sitting, breathing. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds. The mind learning to settle. Know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. No one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. Once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. As you slowly open the eyes, slowly beginning to move. The most important with the practice of meditation is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you'd prefer to feel every moment for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment. It's not from anything I said. It's not from how we sit, hold the hands across the legs. It's not from sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It's everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reactions to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being, no different than any one of us, who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. What that means, very simply, for all of us, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in or where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen and you react. More stuff happens, more reactions. That's it. This practice is learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way we responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how we respond to everything else that's happening throughout our days. So all we're working on is closing the gap to the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. It's not an easy practice. It's not necessarily fun. It's not an escape, as often people think it is. It's direct perception into this present moment. And the present moment is often filled with challenges, difficulty, conflicts. And so the practice is not running from that, it's being with it. Observing our thoughts and words and actions in the middle of each obstacle, each experience. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice free. Sitting, breathing, becoming aware of what you think, say, and do. That's it. In some ways, this practice is really super simple. The teachings are pretty basic. We can complicate them with fancy words and languages and a bunch of esoteric stuff. But the heart of Buddhist teachings really is simple. It is the practice of thinking good thoughts, speaking good words, and doing good deeds over and over and over again. And that never changes. So with that, I'll pause. I really just prefer respond to questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything that's on your mind. And we use the rest of our time this morning, and I'll respond to your thoughts, your questions. And again, for those of you virtually, welcome from wherever you are. The chat box there, feel free to type in questions, thoughts, and I'll do my best to respond to you as well. So I'll just open up to questions.
You were talking about what did they call the 5?
Precepts.
Okay, and what were they?
So the 5 precepts. Let me first talk about precept for a minute, and then I'll get into what they are. But I think it helps. Yeah, I know I brushed over it briefly just to point out this morning versus kind of get into it, but I'm happy to go in more depth. Let's first look at the word precept. Do you drive?
No, I do not.
Have you ever?
Yes, I have.
Okay. When you were driving in the past and you would come to a red light, do you have to stop?
Yes.
You have to?
Well, I don't want to get hurt.
Hang on, one step at a time. Do you have to stop at a red light?
I don't want to get hurt.
That's not my question. Start with one step at a time. The question is, do you have to stop at the red light? Very direct question. I'm not looking for. You ever watch Judge Judy?
Yeah.
You know how she always says, you don't know where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
This is what I'm thinking of right now. I'm asking you a very direct question. Do you have to stop at a red light?
No.
No. But you choose to.
Yes.
Why do you choose to?
For the better to keep myself safe.
Right. So now we're getting into what your initial response was to keep yourself safe.
Right.
But the question of, do you have to stop? No. Right?
Okay.
You could run the red light. You run the red light, what happens? What are things that could happen if you run a red light?
Nothing.
Nothing? Accident? For the record, young lady, always stop at a red light. It's anyone under 16 and not driving yet. Accidents happen. What else could happen? Ticket. What else could happen?
Kill a pedestrian.
Kill a pedestrian. Kill a dog. One more thing could happen that I'm waiting to hear. All of that stuff. You could die. You could kill yourself. What else could potentially happen if you run a red light? Get stopped by the police and get fined. Such a moral, ethical group we have in here. Somebody help me out here. What else could happen? Nothing. Thank you very much. Nothing could potentially happen. You could go through the red light and get where you were going quicker and be totally fine. Again, I'm not suggesting this. Don't ever do that. But hypothetically speaking, lots of things could happen. Precepts are the same way. Precepts are there not to make you judge yourself or critique yourself or think you're a bad person, but to guide you like traffic lights. Smartest, safest thing to do at a red light? Stop. Precepts are the same way. Now, when the Buddha put precepts into place, it wasn't as if he sat down one day and said, I'm going to write up a bunch of rules for our Sangha, for our community. What happened was, as things occurred within the Sangha that were divisive, that caused strife amongst community members, that caused kind of a challenge on the journey, on the practice, he put precepts in place to help people with their own spiritual journey and also to keep the community safe. That's where the precepts came from. And in what's called the Vinaya, which is the Buddhist teachings on the code of conduct, there's literally a description for every precept and why it's there. So if anyone's ever interested in precepts, you can just Google Vinaya and you'll look and see what the precepts are and why they're there. So the very first 5 that he taught were, which is what your question is to refrain from lying. Sounds simple, but not so much. Second one is to refrain from, often it gets translated as killing, but it really comes from harming. Okay. So to do no harm, right? So to refrain from lying, to refrain from harming, to refrain from stealing, taking what is not ours, to refrain from sexual misconduct, and to refrain from intoxicants or anything that alters the state of mind. Typically referred to as drugs and alcohol, but lots of things alter the state of mind. Again, for those who are maybe brand new to the precepts and never heard them before, these are not things that somebody is like sitting up on some high, whatever, judging you for being like a bad Buddhist or a bad person or whatever it is. If you do all 5 of those, they're there to, just like red lights, keep you safe. If we don't lie, if we don't kill, if we don't steal, if we don't commit sexual misconduct, and if we don't use intoxicants to do a bunch of stupid stuff, chances are we're going to suffer less, as will others. Make sense? Yeah. Just like we stop at a red light, chances are keeping people safe. So precepts are really beautiful as a guide. And again, if we think about why you're here, why you get into meditation, why you get into spiritual practice, why you get into Buddhism, it's very often because we're struggling, we're suffering, we're dealing with a lot of life's craziness and chaos. Some of that, potentially, I'm sure nobody in this room, but some of that craziness and chaos in your life, you might have caused yourself. I'm just going out on a limb here. And some of that you caused by yourself may be due to lying, killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, or intoxicants. Potentially. So, does that help? Yeah. That's just kind of a basic overview. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So it's fun to sit with 50 college kids and explore the precepts.
I bet. Because that's their party days usually.
That's pretty much their life. Yeah. Spend 2 hours talking about sexual misconduct and no intoxicants. Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
Go ahead. Consider thoughts or like distorted thoughts to be an intoxicant?
So is your question, just to repeat it for those virtually, was your question, would I consider distorted thoughts an intoxicant? Is that what your thoughts are? So I think the idea of intoxicant really comes from a outside manipulation of your present state of mind. So if your thoughts are just kind of there, and very often they're there, and they're distorted, their intention is maybe not so pure and genuine, then I wouldn't necessarily say that that's an intoxicant. It doesn't mean that it's healthy, but it could be an intoxicant, or it could be a side effect of an intoxicant, where certain things that can stimulate our thoughts very much can intoxicate us and alter our states of mind. I mean, even like, again, getting real, more into details of precepts. I mean, 227 to 300, that's a lot of stuff. Okay, so even the first 10 precepts, there are. And so again, these precepts, you vow to take them as lay Buddhists if you choose to, but monks and nuns, this is their life. And so one of them, for example, is there's no wearing of perfumes or deodorants or any sort of smells that could potentially intoxicate somebody, right? I mean, you ever worn cologne and put it on and said, I'm going to put on cologne because I want everybody to hate how I smell, right? We put on cologne, we put on perfume, we put on deodorant because we want to draw people. We want to intoxicate them with our scent. So this practice is about cutting through desire, cutting through craving. So we work on not creating conditions that could lead towards craving and desire. And again, if you're brand new to Buddhism, please, let me put an asterisk here. I'm not suggesting that that means because you wear cologne or perfume that you're a bad person and you should stop. What I'm asking us to explore with all of these precepts, and that's why I bring this one up, is what's really going on with them, right? And as I always say with precepts, you're not just going to hear them most likely and all of a sudden just stop them, but explore them. If you lie, if you harm, if you steal, if you commit sexual misconduct, if you are turning to intoxicants constantly, explore why, explore how it impacts your life and those around you, and explore, could you ever be without them? So there are really opportunities to explore our thoughts and our words and our actions.
Was there a problem, I'm just curious, with intoxicants when Buddha was around?
There's been a problem for intoxicants, I think, throughout
history?
endless. Yeah.
Oh.
And the other thing to keep in mind, again, I summed it up the way it typically gets summed up, but garlic, for example, is one thing that they were to refrain from as an intoxicant. Apparently it stimulated something going on in the body. So it's not just, like, we often hear about drugs and alcohol, and we often turn to like addiction and, heavy stuff. Often people will bring up this idea that, coffee, same thing. Coffee absolutely is something we are addicted to and stimulates us. Chocolates, foods, things like that. It's more about I think for the average lay person, which we all are, look at the relationship we have to certain things or addictions or cravings we have to certain things and begin to understand what's underneath that. But yeah, the intoxicants weren't just drugs, alcohol. Yeah, I don't believe the monks were like all sitting around getting high and then the Buddha walked over and said, hey, no more.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, I know. But that's kind of, as I was talking, I realized that might have been closer to where you were going with that. So, yeah. Other questions? That or anything?
Are you a proponent of chants when you're meditating as opposed to just focusing on breathing, or is it just sort of whatever people feel most comfortable with?
Yes, and yes. I personally, so the question for those who didn't hear virtually, am I a proponent of chants? during meditation, or, kind of the general idea around that. I am personally, like with my own personal Buddhist practice for the last 19 years, I am a big fan of chanting as a meditative practice. I started at the Shifang Temple down the street here in 2003, and spent a year in their monastery in Taiwan. And that's a mixture of Chan, which is Zen, in Chinese they call it Chan, and Pure Land Buddhism. And chanting is a huge part of that practice. And we would recite chants, the Buddha's name and various other sutras, for hours and hours and hours and hours and days and days and days. Like you could do a week-long chanting retreat where all you're doing from the moment you wake up until the moment you sleep is reciting the Buddha's name or various chants. So to answer your question very directly and personally, yes, I'm a huge fan of chanting. Now the flip side of that, as a Zen practitioner, I'm also a huge fan of, as the Zen teachings are, sensation of breath. And it very clearly states in Anapanasati Sutra that when breathing in, taking a short breath, know you're breathing in, taking a short breath. Breathing out, taking a long breath, know you're breathing out, taking a long breath. So that, what we call Zen today, practice, Chan, which really comes from jhana, knowledge, gnosis, is simple observation of breath. There's no words, there's no chanting. It's just observation of the natural rhythm of the breath. So I'm a big fan of that. When we started Dharma Bum Temple 15 years ago, we built it to introduce people to really core teachings of Buddhism within all different traditions, and to take away a lot of what we saw as barriers that come from cultural temples, which I find absolutely beautiful and important to do. But I saw what I called a revolving door, where for 3 years I saw folks just like here show up there. There was all the chanting in another language, all the bowing, all the robes, all the ritual. People would come in once or twice, observe it like they were watching a movie, and they wouldn't come back. So we started this to kind of remove a lot of that from the practice and focus on what the Buddha actually teach, but then encourage people, by all means, go experience. There's like 20 Buddhist temples within 10 miles of here. Literally. Taiwanese temple, Japanese temple, Vietnamese temple, Lao, Cambodian, Thai temples. They're all over. Experience all of them. The chanting is beautiful. There's a beautiful thing about chanting in another language also. So thinking about intoxicants is kind of like the state of mind. When you hear music, that's another thing that the monks didn't do. There was no dancing, no listening to music, right? And so for those of you who love music, you're like, well, screw those Buddhists then. I want to listen to music, right? Again, not the point. Just understand that when we hear music, what does that do to you? Puts you in altered state. Brings up what?
Other thoughts?
Other thoughts,
Feelings.
feelings, emotions, memories, breakups, all these things that music does a lot to us. I love music, love it, appreciate it, but understand that as this stuff is going on, it's emotionally moving us away from being present, potentially. The cool thing about chanting in another language, if you don't understand it, nothing to understand.
And no association.
No association whatsoever. So you are just completely present with the actual sound. And chanting, again, this is just a very personal experience, but chanting in Mandarin without knowing it, and you're just focused on the recitation of the characters, is super cool, because you're just focused on that present moment experience, and you don't understand it. So there's no mental space to actually think about anything at all, other than the present moment. Present in Zen we call present time awareness. Does that make sense? So I'm kind of rambling on your question as always, but yeah, I'm a big fan of chanting. Yeah.
Can you repeat the mantra instead of chanting?
Can you repeat a mantra instead of chanting? Yeah, definitely. In general, also to that question, if 100, and I say this all the time, if 100 people lead you into meditation, they'll lead you 100 different ways. So it doesn't mean that there's one right way or wrong way. It doesn't mean that the Buddha's way of teaching meditation is the right way and the only way. It's a way. And within Buddhism, there's multiple ways. And mantras are super common and effective and beautiful. I'm a big fan of mantras that you don't have to pay for. There are plenty of mantras out there for free that you can just recite. And again, it's like using the mala beads, it's something to focus on. The chanting, the mantras, repeating over and over again. Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum. It's something to just focus on so our mind is not wrapped up on all the other stuff.
And mantra could be anything.
Mantra, you could recite. My master used to say, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I think it could be Mickey Mouse.
Yes, my master, you could recite the name Coca-Cola over and over again. You could cite the name Jesus Christ over and over again. You could cite the name Amitabha Buddha over and over again. His point was the power was not so much in the mantra itself, although I know a lot of people are into mantras and the powers of them. I'm not trying to negate that, if that's your view. But his teaching was the beauty of the practice wasn't so much in what you were saying as much as it took your entire focus and concentration. That was the beauty of it.
You can get pretty good though at saying a mantra, because I have a mantra, and boy, your mind just goes, you're saying it, it's like anything, it's just like breathing, it can become so automatic that it's still the practice of coming back, no matter what you're using.
The mantra can kind of be there underneath everything, and you've mastered it so well that you can still think about solving all of your problems and the mantra at the same time.
Exactly.
Yes, that's the advanced meditation practice. We're not taking. Yeah. Other questions?
Do you recommend a certain duration of meditation per day to get optimal benefits?
I'm a huge fan of not trying to get any optimal benefits from anything. Ever. That in itself, right? And is this your first time here?
Been a while.
Been a while, yeah. Okay, with a mask, I don't know. I'm never a big fan of trying to get any optimal benefits out of anything related to Buddhism or meditation practice, because optimal benefits, and I understand the intention. I'll go there in a minute, but optimal benefits sounds like we just started some new workout regimen and we're like hoping for peak performance, which is how Western world tends to use meditation and Buddhism. I'm a big fan of meditation practice for the simple sake of doing it. And with that in mind, I'm a big fan of the most effective amount of time is the amount of time that you'll do it. What I mean by that is, let's just say I sat here and I said, yes, 47.5 minutes is the optimal time for peak performance. How many of you have 47.5 minutes every single day to sit and do this? No. If I said 2 minutes a day, that all of you must do this every single day for 2 minutes for the rest of your life, it goes up maybe 1% of you will do that. So I'm a big fan of making it practical, right? If you have a daily practice already, then great. If you don't have a daily practice, my typical recommendation is 5 minutes a day. And using those 5 minutes as an opportunity to just sit without the expectation, but creating the habit. We're much more likely to do 5 minutes a day, 2 minutes a day than we are 30, 40 minutes a day. I mean, think of all the other things that we know are good for us. We all know eating healthy, good for us. Exercise, good for us. 8 hours of sleep, good for us. How are we doing on those things? Right? So I feel the same way about meditation. Just whatever you can do every day is most important. And then if you want to sit longer, beautiful. It's wonderful if you want to sit, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour. But I don't think it's realistic or practical for most people in your already existing daily structure and schedule.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, for sure. The last thing I'll say on that, really, for all of us, is that if we set limits or parameters around doing meditation, Then we spend so much time like, oh, I need to be at this place, has to be at this time, I need the right incense, I don't have the right mala bead. We put so many kind of parameters around it that we take away from like, I'm just going to sit down, shut up, and breathe, and do that for a couple minutes, because that's hard enough.
Yeah, one
Yeah.
thing I would just share that, like, I sort of started discovering, like, I do have a daily practice and I sit for a while, but like, you go to the doctor's office and you get really frustrated because you have to wait, everybody's looking at their phone. And so I started this practice of just when I go to the doctor's office, I just sit there and I almost like sort of hate it sometimes when they call me because I'm sort of getting into it. So
Yeah.
I think, or like you're standing in line at the grocery store, you're not going to close your eyes and meditate, but you just kind of breathe with your breath and do the present moment. Like I found that to be like a really great benefit, even more so than when I sit for 40 minutes in the morning. So
Yeah. And it's almost, I don't want to say, it's just a really beautiful way to bring the practice into your daily life. It is really what it's about. But for those who haven't heard me say this, it's not about how well or how long we sit here in meditation or at home in meditation. It's how does that manifest and play out into our everyday experience.
Yeah, thinking back to the conversation about the precepts,
Yeah.
I'm sure I'm not the only one who experiences this, but I often have a lot of feelings of guilt that come up when I do something that I know is not in my best interest. And yeah, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about those feelings of guilt that often come up and how we can work with that, transform that into more meditation.
So, and I'll kind of close with this thought. It's a great question, really, around, you noticed when you were thinking about the precepts, the feelings of guilt that will arise. And in essence, what do we do with that, right? I think that the feeling of guilt in and of itself can actually be really beneficial. What I mean by that is, without giving any specifics, when you feel guilty about something, just in general, what does that typically mean?
There's knowledge that I should have done something else.
Acknowledge that you should have done something else. So that feeling of guilt is actually really motivating. It's really awakening. It's super important to understand when you look at wisdom within Buddhist practice, when we do things that are wise and when we do things that are ignorant. And when we do things that are ignorant, that harm ourselves or others, we get this feeling of guilt. Beautiful. If you didn't feel any guilt or remorse at harmful things you do, that's a real problem. With me so far? Now, the challenge then is the guilt is not the problem. The problem is when guilt arises and we feel that, what often follows that?
It depends. I mean, often not good behavior.
Not good behavior. What I'm looking at is, just to, without trying to draw it out, often following guilt is shame, judgment, critique. I'm a terrible person. That all happens real quick. I spent a majority of my life doing stuff I shouldn't have done. My life was built on breaking all 5 precepts. How do you think I ended up on this journey? Right? So lots of guilt, lots of shame, lots of self-critique, self-judgment, self-hatred, self-anger. That is what leads to what your response was, which is doing more stuff. So I said, what happens when you feel guilty? You immediately jump to, I forget your exact words, but doing more stuff that's not beneficial, right? But that's because, without really knowing it, you're probably assigning shame, disappointment, all those like tearing ourselves down, thinking we're terrible people. And then when you think you're a terrible person, you start to believe it, and then you feel terrible, and then you think you are terrible, and then you just might as well go do more terrible stuff. And then that vicious cycle repeats for years. Make sense? So the practice is to use the guilt that you feel as a beautiful awareness of, wow, I have a really good heart. My heart tells me I should not do this. And then you got to try to step away. and recognize that that person that is doing that, it doesn't define you. It's not who you are. It's what you're doing in that moment. And can you step away from that and recognize that these actions are not beneficial to self or others? So the practice is to observe it and work on not repeating them. Again, this is where vow is really important. My master always taught around this idea of such a Western culture thing, and I'll close with this thought: repentance, right? We have in this culture this thing of repentance. And so somebody asked him one time about repentance. And he said, when you do things that you shouldn't do, that harm somebody, the way you can repent and the way we know it, he said there's three things. First, recognize what you did was not in line with the Dharma, the teachings, the precepts. Recognize that. Like, be aware that, yes, I hurt this person because I lied to this person. Like, be aware of that. That's the first step. The second step is to then apologize, to own that, to genuinely apologize. Now, here's the little catch. If it's somebody, you broke somebody's heart 20 years ago, and all of a sudden you go to 3 Buddhist classes and you're like, oh, I want to apologize to that person I hurt 20 years ago. They don't want to hear from you. They're over it. They've probably moved on, right? So find another way to apologize, meaning turn to a friend, a loved one, whatever it is, and give that person the genuine apology on behalf of the person from 20 years ago that's really not wanting to hear from you right now. Because then that's really all about you. It's not about them at all. It's about you. So use somebody else in that way to apologize genuinely. And the third part, which is ironically how I started today talking about, is the vow. Is to vow never to do that again. And try to hold yourself to it. And you may make that vow to never do it again. And then the next day, you know what'll happen? You might do it again. You repeat the process. But most important in this process is not judging yourself. Right? Because that's where too many of us get stuck, in judging ourselves, thinking we're terrible people. And if we think we're terrible people, that's a really hard place to come out of. So surround yourself, whether it's here or anywhere, with people who don't think you're terrible people. Because the reality is you're probably not nearly as terrible as you think you are. You've just done a bunch of stuff that hurt people. Anyone here done a bunch of stuff that hurt people? Welcome to the crowd. Welcome to the Dharma Bum Temple, where we surround ourselves with a bunch of people who've hurt people. That's the truth. But we learn to be at peace with that because it's done. Can't change it. Does that help? Yeah. All right, so we'll close on that. We'll join palms. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to more than 6 million lives that have been lost during this pandemic, and their family and friends who continue to suffer to this day. May they all be at peace. May we all be at peace and free from suffering. So a few quick announcements before you all head out. Thank you for being here. My name is Jeff. I'm a Dharma Bum. We opened up the temple 15 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. So thanks for showing up. Every night we have different practices going on, different people leading in different Buddhist traditions. Those of us who lead, we're not monks or nuns, we're not gurus, we're not masters, we're not teachers. We're just practitioners. We do our best to practice every single thing we sit up here and talk about. And we're probably not nearly as good at it as you all might think we are. So keep that in mind also. Let's see, Recovery Sangha meets a few times a week. Anyone battling drugs, alcohol, or anything else for that matter. We have a Family Sangha that is going again once a month. So parents, kids, toddlers, teens, our college group, San Diego State's up and running. We are looking for our Family Sangha, which does meet once a month. It's really beautiful. The parents are up here. The kids are downstairs in the meditation hall, and then in kind of that middle dining meeting area, we have the toddlers. And I always say we just kind of corral the toddlers. So we are looking for anybody who wants to, we want to build kind of a little volunteer team of 5 that wants to commit once a month, potentially twice, once every other month, to helping watch toddlers. So from 9 to 10:30, you get to just hang out with toddlers, make sure they don't climb stairs or eat Legos. So if anybody wants to help out with the toddlers, let me know. It's literally once a month, 9 a.m. to 10:30 on a Saturday. And believe it or not, we've had a really hard time actually getting people to commit to that. Maybe it just doesn't sound as fun, as exciting as a bunch of other stuff. But it's really important, because if we don't get people to watch the toddlers, then that means the parents who come here can't be here because they have to be with the toddler. So if anybody's interested in that, let me know. Buddha Fear is downstairs. If you need anything, Maggie is there. And then also we'll have a crew outside if anybody wants to hang out and help water, garden, sweep, anything like that. You can gather out front. We always appreciate the time there. So thanks for being here. Wish you well.